All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Epic Meta Podcast. George, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you, Tang?
Good. Good. Uh, Planned to wake up early, but, still woke up late and I guess take my time waking up, do my morning process. So it's good. It's a good day. It's sunny outside.
It's ungodly hot already.
Yeah, just go outside real quick and come back in, or even start the car early and put the AC on when you drive. So yeah, but cool. Today we're gonna talk about the documentary. Is it Crumb or is it Crumb the documentary? Do you know the official title?
It's called Crumb.
Crumb. So I was about 30 seconds away from texting you, I think Thursday, because normally I can go and find some stuff on either Google Plays or Amazon Prime, which is where you can rent a movie or
hmm
buy it out as well. And I couldn't find Crumb. And then I found it on YouTube. So it's for our listeners. It's available on YouTube, and you can just search for it, and you can find multiple versions of it and just watch it. So that's how I view it originally.
I have
But
it on. I have it on Amazon Prime.
mm, so you did find it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Cool. Huh. I wonder why I didn't maybe I didn't look that hard. Awesome. So yeah, I do have some questions, like yes no questions for you straight off the top, before you even give a summary of it.
Okay.
But I want to because right, what the thing with YouTube algorithm is that it figures out what you are watching and it pops up, I would say, relevant videos, or it tries to.
hmm
And so the first question is for you. Did you know about this before you start listening or watching Jordan Peterson?
Oh, way before. Um, I
Oh,
I saw
cool.
it in before 2000, so in the late 90s. It's the first time I saw
Okay.
it.
Because I did looked it up, and it was documentary was released in 1994.
hmm
If I get that information correct, did you follow his art or know about him before the documentary, like before he was famous?
No, I didn't know about him. I was visiting a friend of mine who lives in Las Vegas, or who lived in Las
Mm,
Vegas at the time, and we were
mm,
kind of waiting for the evening to come. So we were just sitting around, and he put it on
mm.
just randomly, and it really caught my attention right off the bat.
Now, did you follow his comic art or comic books after you learned about his this documentary?
I haven't seen too much of that. I have. He did an illustrated version of the Book of Genesis in the Bible,
Mm,
and it's
mm.
like word for word the entire Book of Genesis. uh,
Interesting.
and yeah, it's great. So I have
Are
that.
you, yeah, are you generally, I guess, either before or after, you know, a fan of comics, in or comic art specifically in regards to, anything before or after Crumb?
I really haven't read that many comic books, and I
Mm,
didn't really do that when I was younger. Uh, I did read relatively recently a graphic novel, and when I say relatively recently, I mean in the past 20 years.
mm-hmm,
I read The Watchmen. Are
mm,
you familiar with
yes.
that?
The I'm familiar with the title, but I haven't seen it or read it myself. But yeah, I know about the Watchmen. So pretty cool. That's all I have because I was just curious if you were echo chambering yourself, which is a lot of people do. And I just saw the YouTube algorithm popped up some stuff. And I was worried that we're just getting all of our stuff from Jordan Peterson and just kind
No,
of
no, no. Although
okay,
it surprised me recently to hear him make references to Crumb.
yeah,
Uh, But
Yeah, I saw that immediately after YouTube, because what YouTube does is after a video ends, it brings up another and like suggests for you to keep watching. And so I was curious how you came across this, but sounds like it was completely random. So pretty interesting. So yeah, let's start by giving a quick breakdown, and you can do talk about what is documentary about, and who the gentleman is for the topic of documentary. We'll go
okay,
from there.
so the film is about this artist. He's famous for cartoon art, I guess you would say that he's done. His name is Robert Crumb, and I guess he was more famous in the 60s and 70s as part of like the hippie counterculture, although he's kind of remained popular amongst some people, I guess, ever since.
Yeah.
So the documentary is basically this guy, Terry Zwigoff, who I guess is a friend of Robert Crumb's, got his permission to film him for a period of time before Robert Crumb moved from the United States to France. And so there was a lot of interviewing of Robert Crumb, his wife, his two brothers, Charles Crumb and Maxon Crumb, and his mother, who lives in Philadelphia, and his brother Charles lives with his mother, or lived with his mother, and Maxon, I believe, lives in San Francisco. And at the time, Robert was living in the Los Angeles area, I guess. I'm not sure exactly. Somewhere in California, though.
So that's the version you saw? Because I wonder what version I saw then.
What do you mean?
Because the version I saw didn't include all that. It only included him talking about his life and his art. I didn't see his brothers or his mother.
That's a major part of it, my friend.
Huh. We're watching different things.
That might be sufficient to derail our podcast.
No, I think it's still so. I wonder how many podcasts or how many documentary there are, because the one I watch is just about him and his wife at the time, and I think they were situated in, I forgot what state, but it was in a house, and he just talked about his experience. Pretty
yeah, okay.
Pretty general theme, I would say.
You missed a huge chunk.
Let's go with his art. And why did you think, of course, it's very unique individual, but what did you take away that was so, why did it stick with you all this time versus anything else in relate to comic arts or, just this documentary in particular?
Well, he's very honest. He's not afraid to be to breach taboo barriers, I guess I would say, especially in the area of sexuality and I guess to a certain extent racism. His art can be somewhat shocking because to certain people, it's cartoon art, and there's one image in particular that I have in mind where there's this huge kind of fat naked woman who's balancing on her front arm, on her arms and her chest, and then her back is sort of up in the air behind her, and her legs are up in the air, and then there's these little guys that are crawling up her and then diving into her ass and then climbing out of her mouth.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I've seen, I don't remember that one specifically, but I remember other ones that were, I would say, disturbing and not, it was basically gross, right? I think a lot of his work borderline on, where do you draw the line between comic book art or just art and then porn? Because what is that quote from the Supreme Court a while back? It's like they couldn't
About
define it.
pornography. Yeah,
Right.
I
They
can't
said,
define it, but I know it when I see it.
yeah. So, even the Supreme Court or even as society, we can't really define it, but we know when it crossed the line. And I think he blurs that line in regards to his comic book art. But I would say, man, I think for out of context, like, yes, his stuff is definitely strange, but if you compare to the rest of the world, like Japanese manga, there is some crazy, crazy stuff out there. So he's not alone in that area, and I feel like he's out of time in regards to what he does, because if he was doing that, you know, today or whenever Japanese manga come about, um, he would definitely find his crew and his niche much much faster. So the version that I saw, it was just him sitting in kind of his house and talking about his life. Where does the brothers and his mother come in as far as, what did they think about him?
Okay, so his mother and brother, his oldest brother, Charles Crumb, at the time of the filming of the movie, they lived in a house in Philadelphia, in that area. And they're both recluses, pretty much. In fact, Charles refers to them as, we're two recluses living in the same house. And you can see from the filming that there's like blankets covering the windows, and they have cats that,
Boy.
They have cats that have the run of the house. And Charles has an upstairs bedroom, and the mattress is dirty, and the room is filled with books, like stacked on top of each other, because he never leaves the house, and he's on medication. Jeez. I guess he had a mental breakdown early in life, and that required him to be on medication. But Charles, when they were kids, he forced Robert and his other brother to draw comics, and and Robert had a bunch of the early comics that they had drawn. Did you see any of those?
Yeah. He was the version I saw. He just kind of explained how it was an outlet for him, almost like therapy. And whereas normal kids go outside and play or do whatever they do, he would play inside his head with the whatever he draws up, and kind of like like storyboards almost, just what that's what we call it today. But frame by frame, he would kind of just share his life, and that's how their siblings kind of just enjoy that kind of stuff. Is that what you got as well?
Well, his brother was fixated on Treasure Island. This was in the 50s. I guess there was a movie or a TV show, Treasure Island. I guess it was a movie, because they talk about it being from Disney, and so a lot of their comics had to do with this theme of Treasure Island, and particularly Long John Silver and this boy that hung around him, and Robert would talk about how they did like a 2-man comic. So like Charles would draw a couple of frames, and then he would draw another couple of frames, and so they'd have to work off of each other. Yeah. But he found out later in life that Charles was fixated on the young boy, and
there's a lot of mental situation
or
condition.
Dysfunction.
Yes, there's a lot of like conditions. Like when I was watching his documentary, I felt disturbed, but also I would say somewhat sad for him, because like if you have this tendency today, it will be, say you grow up in a family, or you don't have means and access to certain resources, it would be not necessarily condemned, but you would be treated per se, and it would be a warning. Like if you are a kid, go to an elementary school, and somehow this stuff is like leaked on Facebook or Instagram, your parents will be on this, and it's just like it won't be the way it was for his experience. And like I said, this will be exposed and you'll be treated and kind of just bring it out in the open so people can like, and other people, online as well, right? So I think this is pre-internet, so it just seems strange, but post-internet, anything that's strange, you can find a community kind of like support and kind of dive deeper into like what's wrong and figure something out.
Mhm.
Whereas when I was watching this, I feel like he's like like I said, out of time in a way where he's just alone for a lot of his life. He just in his own mind.
Well,
And
certainly as a young man, he was alone. He talks about
yeah,
not having, like, girls wouldn't pay attention to him.
mm-hmm.
Probably, it sounds like most people wouldn't pay attention to him.
No,
And he's very nerdy looking. And his brother, Charles, was sort of a normal looking kid, but he had a problem with his personality. And nobody liked him either. And Robert actually drew a cartoon of him. Like, a lot of his cartoons are about him and the experiences he's had in life. And one of them is of there's this bully named Scutch in the high school. And this was in the 1950s, I guess. And Scutch bullies Charles and punches him out. And then Charles gives up trying to like defend himself after that and just sort of becomes a shadow. And Robert observes all this and feels bad about it. And this is all depicted in a cartoon he drew.
I think that's unique to him. Is I don't know of any other. Well, I don't know a lot of comics, right? I follow like cartoons, which is based on comics, and then of course the trend that we have now, which I'm totally a fan of, with Marvel Comics and DC Comics becoming movies franchises. But outside of that, maybe a few Japanese comic that also turn into movies. But other than that, I don't know of any other comic that's weirdly is reflective of a person's life. So it's really unique in that sense. So unless you know of another comic strip or artist that tend to portray their personal life and just reveal everything one at a time.
In the movie, his wife also draws comics about herself, but she seems like more of a pale reflection of his artistic ability. So a lot of this dysfunction, though, stems back to their parents. Robert's father was a Marine in World War II and then was some kind of businessman afterwards. And Robert talks about how his father wanted at least one of his sons to grow up to be a Marine. And instead, the three of them grew up to be these like geeky, nerdy weirdos. And Robert describes how that broke his father's heart.
Yeah, he also draw an archetype, right? And so in comic or movies, at least I refer him to archetype, and he draw his dad as an archetype as well in his comics, as the way he draws them, this 1950s with the fedora, suit and tie, and like very built. And I certainly.
Well, I'm sorry. A lot of his art has to deal with sort of critiquing or satire,
caricatures.
Making a satire or a caricature of that 1950s facade. I guess that when we look back on the 50s, we think of like Leave It to Beaver and all those kind of sanitized families and the strong patriarchal fathers wearing a suit and tie, just hanging out in the house. And the mother who, is it's a homemaker and cleans, and the kids who are like, gee whiz, and all that.
Yeah, very much. When he was talking about that, I couldn't stop thinking, and really it extends to the rest of his art throughout his career as well. It's almost but that was the core. That's when he started and did a lot of that work, or his, I would call it his main work of his life. I feel I couldn't help but connect it to oh my god, now it left my mind. The hang on, let me look it up. The movie. Now I have to look it up. Fight Club. So, have you ever seen Fight Club?
Yes.
So I don't know if you draw the same thing, but I immediately found his story to be at the beginning of Fight Club, where Edward Norton's character was basically unhappy with the, I would say, the humdrum of life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, getting a job, going to work, 9 to 5, and just, you know, just almost like what I say, a robot, right? And you just, you know, go through your day. There's a scene in Fight Club that I couldn't get out of my head where he was slowly, I think at the time, I'm not sure it was IKEA or not, but literally replicating what he saw in a magazine in a you know, what is a nice apartment, and starting consuming and purchasing all this furniture that he doesn't really need.
Right.
It was right before.
There were labels underneath all his furniture saying like what the piece was and how what it cost.
Yeah,
as if his apartment was a catalog. Correct.
And that scene happens, you know, almost right before he had a breakthrough. And so when Crumb, the documentary about Crumb, he was doing that, I just felt like that's literally the same problem that is gonna keep happening in our modern society. And I wonder, even back then, he was notioning that or trying to speak about it,
mm-hmm.
but through his comic instead, because he couldn't really put a word on it, for lack of a better term.
Well, there's one scene in the movie where he's talking to someone in a restaurant, and he says that he complains that, you know, people are walking advertisements. They have 49ers hats on, and, you know, products emblazoned on their shirts and jackets and stuff. And he said that, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, you know, it used to be that people made their own culture, and they you know, and it developed over years and years, but that's all gone in America now because it's been replaced by this bought, sold, market researched, unified field, and basically it's capitalism, and you know, whatever they put out, people are into it, and you know, they can't wait to have the money to buy what, you know, is being put out there, and essentially the culture we now live in is just this thing that's designed to make money.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Wall-E, the kids cartoon?
I've heard of it. I haven't actually seen it.
There's a scene in Wall-E where, I mean, it was take that concept and amplify it to 1,000, and people are living in this spaceship in outer space because it's post-apocalyptic.
Mm-hmm.
But the humans are taken care of by the robots, and they are just fed, and they got so heavy they couldn't walk anymore. Plus, they're in space, so their bone deteriorate. But they literally sit around, float around, and just consume, from food to TV. Everybody had a screen right in front of their face, and this is like the same thing. That's what he was addressing, is consumerism and capitalism to the max. So I couldn't help but relate to those movies when I was watching his interviews. Yeah, that's my 2 cents on it.
Mm-hmm. Robert talks about his artistic method. Someone asked him early on in the documentary, you know, is there some idea that you're trying to put out there when you draw? And he's like, he responds that, you know, he can't think in terms of conscious messages. When he's drawing, he's letting whatever's inside of him come out. And it's sort of an act of courage or bravery to to take that chance to let whatever's inside of him come out and not worry about people judging him for it.
Yeah.
And so, and his wife describes his art as just the expression of his id, in its purest form. So it's an interesting. He doesn't have a filter. He doesn't filter himself and he refuses to participate in this bought, sold, market researched, unified field that so there's something compelling about that.
Yeah. I not to dismiss it, but I think he would. Of course, there's downside, but in today's world, he would find his spot in like Reddit. I don't know if you know about Reddit. It's a website.
Yeah, I know.
It's a forum. Yeah, he would find himself on there, and he can dive freely online or any other social boards, and let his stuff out. The other thing I couldn't help but connect to is Japanese anime. Have you ever seen Akira?
No, I don't think so.
Akira is a famous. You have to see it. If I watch Crumb for you, you need to watch Akira for me.
But you didn't watch Crumb.
I did watch. So I did watch the one I could find. And the one that I watched didn't include his mom or his brother, but I'm pretty sure it's the same.
But that's
documentary.
like 50% of the movie.
This is like about an hour, so maybe it's like different editing.
The movie version I saw was 2 hours, over 2 hours.
And it was made by the same guy, Terry's with the Z something
Zwigoff.
In his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one I watch.
So
and it said
they just must have filtered out all the scenes with his family.
Yeah, I guess so, because it's just the one I watch on YouTube. It said Confessions of Robert Crumb.
Well,
so I don't know.
The documentary is just Crumb.
Crumb.
It's not
the
Confessions.
Because on my Amazon Prime, it said it's unavailable. Like you can't even rent it. So I'm curious why it's either blocked out or not available.
Well, I purchased it last year sometime, so maybe they just took it out of circulation.
But the Akira anime, what's so fascinating about it, because it was hand drawn, similar to his work, but it was very complicated. So like a lot of his art, with Crumb's art later on, he did a lot of shading work, and he found it like fascinating. And it's like if you look at a pamphlet of his, it's very detailed, and that's what stood out for me in regards to the connection to Akira, because there's a lot of technology today to help you draw better, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, what he did is it has to be done by hand, and the way he did it has to be done by hand, and that's how Akira was done. It was all by hand, and if you watch it, you wouldn't believe how amazing it is, and you think it was done by a computer. So, yeah. What stick out to you the most all this time that you find fascinating with his work, other than the things that we talked about?
Well, it's really just the way he expresses himself and the way he, he's not a sellout, as you may have seen. He got lots of offers to make movies out of the stuff that he created, and he rejected most of them or all of them, just because he didn't want to be a part of that, that unified field.
I think
he
got Hollywood burnout, for lack of a better term, because one of his strip got made into a movie as well, the one with the cat.
Yeah, but he had nothing to do with that. They took his art and made the movie out of it, and against his will, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't like that scene very much, and then he left it afterwards. The one I saw, there was a small, I guess, comic book convention at the time, and he didn't even enjoy that part, which I find odd, because the convention, from the look of it, it didn't look like a very commercial. Like if you go to a comic book convention today, because of the comics being made into movie franchises is very, very, I would say, corporate. There's movie star announcement made about new movies coming out. Stuff like that is very, I would think it's more enjoyable. But the the one that was shown in the documentary, it was thoroughly depressing. And for him, it was still an aversion. Um, and I thought that was really strange that he has such difficulty just enjoying the smallest part of it. Although he enjoys the other stuff that comes along with that fame. Uh,
What stuff is that?
he's the one I watched. He said, the girls started noticing him. He moved to California, moved to a commune, met other artists. So all that other stuff he did enjoy and liked it. Experimenting with drugs and whatnot as well, come with all that stuff. That little fame that he had before it was the same time frame where it was starting to, people starting to want to sell his stuff and make into movies. So yeah.
Yeah, when he was in the documentary, he talked about how girls basically ignored him, and all that changed once he got famous. And he kind of says that sarcastically. Like, the sense I get of him is, he's very critical of the United States, very critical of people in general, just not having an intellectual curiosity to see beyond capitalism. I guess he doesn't use the word capitalism. But I'm using
Yeah.
it. He, I don't know. All this is shaped by this dysfunctional family that he grew up in.
How many times have you seen this already?
Oh, I'm not sure.
More than 2?
Yeah, more than 2.
Less than 10?
Let's say 10. I don't know. It's since
All right.
In the last 20 years.
So certainly it's something that's stuck out for you and you find fascinating. For me, it's I'm trying to think of this movie. There are movies out there that I like, but I can only watch like 1 or 2 times because it's not so much disturbing. It's just like something I watch to understand, and then highly unlikely will watch it again. And Crumbs fall into that category. It's not that I don't like it.
You didn't actually see the documentary, though. You're describing scenes that did not appear in the documentary, and you missed half the movie and what you saw. So I cannot say that you actually saw the documentary.
Fair enough. God, what is his name? I have to look up while you talk. But Machinist is another movie that I've seen that I can only watch 1 time. I mean, I could probably watch with another person a second time, but
what's it about?
I don't know. Machinist is a Christian Bale movie where the man committed murder, but you didn't know this at the beginning. It's basically finding out that he was the criminal. It's somewhat similar to Fight Club, that he has a split personality.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't know that either at the beginning of the movie. When you watch, it was just a guy that was, he was just the skinniest person you ever seen. Is walking like skeleton. And
Christian Bale was?
Yes. Christian Bale did a whole thing and lost weight for this. It's the most disturbing thing I've ever seen. And he
is he an alcoholic in the movie?
No. He was insomniac, couldn't sleep, couldn't figure why he couldn't sleep. And then at the end of the movie, remember why. And that's when we found out everything about the movie. And it's just something that I watched once and I liked it. It was a good movie. Mm-hmm. But unless I watch it with someone else, I wouldn't watch again. But I guess that's not your take on this. You find his work to be, I guess, refreshing. Would that be fair to say?
I find him very interesting. I mean, he's bizarre. I mean, he has a very unique mind, and not only his artistic talent, but his refusal to sell out. So he's very authentic.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of authenticism currently running through our current culture.
Yeah.
But so you described the movie that you just described, and saying you couldn't watch it a second time, but that had a surprise ending to it based on the description you just gave. I mean, so that makes sense that you wouldn't want to watch it. If you already knew the surprise ending.
That's not it. There's other works, and I'm looking up the other one as well that I want to bring up because I keep forgetting what it's called. But it's the kind of work where I appreciate for what it is, and that's it. Like he is a unique individual, and I attested his art on a certain level, but it just frankly creeps me out. Now his take on society and modern culture and capitalism, that's fair game. I actually like that stuff, but as far as his art and like you said, the id, right, like ego versus id and all that stuff, that is too far deep into the human psyche for me to consume a second time. So like if I was eating ice cream or eating some chips and like, oh, I don't have a movie to watch, let's watch this movie, it would not be this movie.
Well, this is where all the parts about his family kind of give you a broader context in which it makes his personality and his art make more sense. It's sort of a reaction to that 1950s, hygienic on the outside, but extremely dysfunctional on the inside family.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Jordan Peterson talking about this earlier. And really, the first time I heard Jordan Peterson reference Crumb is maybe like a month ago. So it's very, very recent. And he refers to Crumb as, it's recent from my, he might have mentioned it long ago, but I only saw it recently. Yeah. But he mentions the movie Crumb as the Oedipal complex, like really well articulated. So it's a good articulation of the Oedipal complex, which is a psychological...
Oedipus, yeah.
Yeah.
Freud, yeah. Like, in regards to him being honest, I would say that's true. He's definitely stand out, but there's a lot of artists out there that do the same thing. Like famous painters we have in the past that would just paint what they feel and see, and whether people agree with it or not, it just becomes famous work. Not in the sense of comic, but in actual like with color, like art painting. So he's not the only one out there. Same thing with, I think, probably stories writers as well. Nothing come to mind as far as, because I don't explore that world as much, but it's very unique in regards to his view. And then Hicks' experiment with drugs as well. Mm-hmm. I think in the past when we have famous painters, they do the same thing.
Like the one I'm not making the point that he's the only one out there. I'm making the point that this documentary is very interesting because it gets into the mind of one of those individuals, one of those extremely artistic, but also flawed or as we all are.
Yeah.
Individuals.
I like his art. Like later in his career, I like his art more. At the beginning, I didn't think his art was that. From my sense of like the normal, not saying normal, but I would say action-based movies and comics. For example, I like the DC animation universe with the Batman series and the Justice League series. Big fan of all that stuff because I don't know, I just enjoy action stuff. And his art, honestly, until the end when he talked about shading, where it takes him like longer to do a what do you call like one page, a panel? Like it took him longer to do a panel because he did a lot of like shading and background work. Whereas at the beginning of his career, he just draw characters and movement. I like that stuff more. did you like all of his art, or just a few, or which one stand?
So what you were describing is not part of the documentary I saw, but it's interesting in that it seems like you're drawn to the practical application of things, and
you're just drawn to him,
how he articulates his technique. And I'm more drawn to the inner workings and the psychology.
Because you can have,
but I gotta say this podcast is a little frustrating because we didn't watch the same thing.
I have to find out a way for you to share it.
But there's a lot of material that I would have liked to have talked about that you didn't see. So
you can bring it up. We can still talk about it.
I know, but I wanted your reaction of that, from that material. Or to that material.
Honestly, I don't think it's that much different. You can try and send it to me afterward, but I can send you what I saw, and it's pretty much the same thing.
Well, if you didn't see his brothers or his mother, that's a big chunk of it. Did you see his kids, his daughter and his son, Jesse?
I just saw the one child. I would say his kid, but
boy or girl?
I can't remember.
You can't
I
remember?
think they only had. No, they didn't. It was only I want to say a son. It was with Aileen, his second wife, and they had one child at the time. So they talked about how it is basically he became what he kind of despised, and at the end they were just a normal working family, and he had to do what they call a 9 to 5 because she was busy taking care of the child, and so he has to move out into kind of like a second garage and built like an art studio there to focus on his work. It was just getting overwhelming. So
none of that is in the documentary.
Yeah, we saw different documentaries then, but to me as a person, his psyche, it's just fascinating, but there's a lot of disturbed people out there that are fascinating artists as well, and from what I can tell, his withdrawal into himself allow him to create some of the most intense work, controversial as well, and that's where it pushed me back. So as much as I like to explore his psyche, what did you see in regards to his mom, for example, that kind of drawn you back? Because this is not the first or second or third time you've seen this, versus other documentaries, for example, that kind of revolve you back into to this.
Well, his mom at the time of the documentary, as I said before, is basically a recluse, lives inside the house with her son Charles, who committed suicide after the movie was filmed, by the way. The mother, Charles describes his mother as an amphetamine addict when they were kids. And she would fight with his father quite a bit. And but she was just sort of an old lady who was sort of fat and talked with a very, very strange Pennsylvanian accent. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but there's this weird accent that people in Pennsylvania have. And I guess it's from more out in the middle of the state, but anyway, she had that very strongly, and just was very unaware of her own sort of psychology, and she was unwilling to admit that certain things happened. Like there's one instance where she describes having to take care of the children when they were young because the father was out somewhere, and Charles said, "You used to give us. Remember that time you used to give us enemas?" And she's like, "No, I don't remember that." And Robert's like, "Oh, somebody gave me an enema."
Sounds like I would enjoy that documentary even less. Like it was. I'm not saying it was torture, but it was. I was struggling through watching the thing I was watching, and I was like, oh my god, when is this gonna be over? Because for me, it was like, yeah, as much as I like exploring psychology, I didn't major in it for a reason, because there's some crazy stuff out there. And now on an entertainment value, yeah, I love that stuff. Like if you, a while back, there was a thriller movie called The Zodiac Killer. You ever see that movie?
No.
Zodiac Killers, and then recently there's a show on Netflix called Mindhunter as well. So they focus on actually there's more. Yeah, Dexter is another one too. So a lot of serial killers.
I've seen Dexter.
Yeah. So Mindhunter is where in the 80s the FBI started forming basically the behavioral science unit, and so it takes you through that with all the serial killers that they had to interview them. So they start working on profiling, and they start working on understanding the psyche a little bit more. So that stuff.
So there's things that you're very interested in. There's things that I'm very interested in, and they intersect in this very small space in the middle.
Venn diagram? Yeah, Venn diagram.
So I think the secret to this podcast going forward is to find the stuff that sits in the middle.
No, I would say explore the other side more, because the Venn diagram, that area will dive deeper.
That's true. The Freakonomics episode was more on your side, and that I thought that episode was good. The major flaw in this episode is that we both didn't see the same thing. So
yeah.
Which I've said over and over again. I should stop saying that.
Don't worry about that part. I would worry, because you said you find it fascinating, but you didn't really explain why you would watch it more than 3 times. Because I think after one passing, I understand. And
because I'm not watching it for information. I'm watching it because being exposed to. I don't know. There's something about the vibe of the movie. There's something about the way people interact.
They didn't creep you out? Because it sounds like it would creep me out even more.
There's a disturbing aspect to it, but there's also a very, there's also an aspect of like the human will, the human spirit to persevere, a traumatic childhood and come out of it, certainly as a flawed person, but a very artistic person, as disturbing as some of his artwork is, and as his attitude towards, everyday people is, there's a uniqueness and a brilliance there. And just so when I watch it, the compelling part is, being close. And I'm trying to articulate something that I don't fully understand, but I'm going to do my best. It's being close to a brilliant mind and sort of being in the presence of that and absorbing, not absorbing in that I'm taking it in, but absorbing in that I can appreciate that brilliance and that uniqueness and that, there's something there. It's not an ordinary everyday person. There's something, and I don't know. Is it that I can learn something from a person like that, or that I can appreciate their brilliance? Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something about that I find compelling, and that causes me to. Maybe cause isn't the right word, but that attracts me to it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think this is why people like art. And for a long time, still now, there are certain art. So I have on my background, you can't see it on my computer. It's a painting. It's called The Night Owls. And it's a simple painting of people drinking coffee. I forgot the name of the artist, but I actually saw the real painting in the Chicago Museum of Art one day, and I was like, oh, that's the painting I liked for the longest time, and I didn't even know about it. But there are certain things to art that speak to people and connect in a way that's deep. And I think, for lack of a better term, our unconscious brain, when he was exploring this stuff and just letting it all out, like just open that floodgate. I can speak for myself. I don't know how to do that, right? I don't know how to. I don't have a way of accessing that part, and I think a lot of people are more in touch of that part of themselves than I am. So they find this stuff fascinating, and because of that, it's easier to. It compels you to explore it further. Certainly, musicians, a lot of them are like that, I would say, or artists in general.
Yeah, like
are.
watching this movie is more like listening to a piece of music that I enjoy.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm learning anything, although I did learn new stuff this time around because I took notes through the whole thing and paid even closer attention. And there's little details that you pick up, but that's not the real reason. There's something about it that, the movie itself is a piece of art as far as I'm concerned.
The one I watched was clearly made for tape, like VHS quality. So I can watch documentaries. It has to be modern documentaries, or maybe
this was modern.
I'm less fascinated with historical. And so if it's story based, like this one that I watch, and probably yours, then it draws me in more. But if you remember school, or they just play a historical movie to watch, I'm lost. So it was already, yeah.
There's these documentaries I remember watching in fifth grade that a fifth grade social studies teacher used to play, and there's no dialogue or or commentary. It's just it's just footage of these Eskimos in the Arctic, and we watched them like hunting caribou, hunting seals, building igloos, and the main Eskimo, his name was Itty Magnark, if I'm remembering correctly, and I've searched high and low for those movies ever since recently. And they're not available on YouTube, I tried to look up Itty Magnark in a Google search. And, maybe I'm not spelling it correctly. It probably could be spelled a million different ways. But I wonder where they came from, and
where they go.
Yeah, but they stuck in my head the whole time.
Wow. Yeah. So if you would have to recommend this to if you were to pitch this documentary, would you focus in on like people that like psychology stuff or art stuff? Because for me, he was a comic book artist first, and that's why I hone in on. And for that, I did find it unique, but there's a lot of comic book artists out there that's strange also, and he's not alone in that field. Now his family life. No, it's not that I reject it, but his personal conflict and family life, that's psychology stuff that a psych major or a person who trying to understand humans better would find absolutely amazing, right? Absolutely like for like a study case to kind of just dig into. Who do you think like this documentary would attract more to those two, or a third group that you would try to sell it to?
I guess anyone who's interested in art, particularly cartoon art, anyone who's interested in psychology, particularly the psychology of dysfunctional families. And his brothers grew up to be highly dysfunctional people too. It's just they didn't have the same artistic skill that he did, but they did actually, because they were all drawing cartoons as a kid, and his brother Charles some of his work is really good. I don't know. Robert just had the ability to bridge that gap between that dysfunctional family world and fame, I guess. I don't know. So who would I recommend it to? Certainly not you.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be more interesting.
No, it is interesting, but it's like I said.
I thought it would be interesting to get your take on it, but it wasn't that interesting to me.
Yeah.
It was frustrating.
Yeah.
I would have to say this was frustrating.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is?
Because I'm not as deep of a processor as you are. Like I said, there are certain things I would watch to expand my horizon, and certainly I would watch a lot of stuff, but I wouldn't consume it like a fan of it, right? Because you're a fan of it, and there are other things that I would say is adjacent to this that I would be a fan of, like Mindhunter series on Netflix, or that movie The Machinist. But I wouldn't watch The Machinist to just watch it and eat some popcorn. Right? It's not a popcorn eating movie. And this documentary is not a popcorn documentary for me. For you it is, but for me it's, after a certain amount of disturbance, I'm like, all right, I'm out.
There was one movie I saw that was recommended by the same guy who showed me Crumb. It was called Requiem for a Dream.
Yes.
And that movie was horrible. Like,
oh my God, I'm a big fan of that movie.
Oof.
How are you a fan of Crumb and not a fan of Requiem for a Dream is what's puzzling me. Because when I was watching Crumb, that's what I was thinking too. Fight Club, Machinist, Requiem for a Dream. It's about the human psychology of being unhappy and unsatisfied, and then you either take a productive turn and basically sustain, what we call a normal life, and versus just going on that deep end and just lose it. And Requiem for a Dream is people who are just
that. I mean, that movie left me feeling very, very disturbed. Requiem for a Dream.
It's the best thing to show a teenager if they ever have an inkling of like, oh, drugs are cool. Watch this movie, and it'll be the best PSA announcement ever. And I wish whoever's running all that stuff can just watch this movie as a mandatory high school drug whatever related. And yeah, it turned me off. Why did you find it so disturbing? But I liked it so much. I'm curious.
I guess maybe because
because the way you describe his mom is how I think of his other mom character in Requiem for a Dream almost immediately. Not the same.
Yeah, that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was just how addicted they got and how they would be. They would do the addiction took over their lives. They would steal. Yeah. One guy lost his arm. The girl prostituted herself. I don't. There's something about
the dark side of humanity.
Well, and particularly addiction that I find disturbing and don't want to watch.
Yeah, no, it's very hard to watch, I would say, but it's a good
and sticks in my mind later, and tortures me for a period of time. So, and I don't like that tortured period post watching.
I wouldn't, same thing. Like I said, Requiem for a Dream is not a popcorn movie either, but I've seen it once or twice, more than Crumb. And I would say that it's more relevant in regards to addiction, in regards to understanding what people go through and not judge so harshly when people say they suffer from something and you're like, oh, just quit it. That's not how it works.
No, addiction is much harder than that. But and I certainly have compassion for people who are in that state. I mean, I think I can understand why people would head in that direction. But there were also like malevolent people in that movie that took advantage of that state. Yeah. And I don't like. So I don't like I don't like that kind of malevolence. That's like evil. And I don't.
There's no happening.
The combination of addiction and those sorts of malevolent people is just highly, highly disturbing to me.
it's not a happy ending movie, and
No.
that's why I like it. So I think I like a lot of realistic work in regards to the documentary, like Crumb and his life. It's just it is realistic, and I find it interesting, but not in the same way that I find Requiem for a Dream is interesting, because it shows everything that's wrong and dark with humanity, and yeah, it's very this, like you said, the same guy to recommend. The other movie I was thinking of that I couldn't remember when we were talking is Schindler's List. You ever watch
Oh,
Schindler's List?
yeah, I love Schindler's List. I
Right,
love.
it's the same bucket I would put this in. Same thing with The Machinist, and same thing with documentary. Like something to watch. Like I could not watch Schindler's List like a second time unless I watch it with somebody else. But it's how you feel about Requiem for a Dream is how I feel about Schindler's List.
That's
Uh,
interesting because Schindler's List, even though there's a lot of there's a lot of graphic violence, and people being murdered and
Torture.
tortured
Yep.
and murdered. There's like a cathartic ending. He's a changed person at the end. I could have saved more.
It does end
And
on a
it's
happy note, somewhat happy note,
yeah.
but
I mean, they went through a
that's not
lot,
enough for me.
and yeah, and then the war ended and all that. Requiem for a Dream. There was what it was
But
just,
that's more realistic based on real life. I think Requiem for a Dream
but it was a story, and
makes more sense to me.
stories have to follow an arc. They're not supposed to be like real life.
Mm,
Documentaries can be like real life, but stories have to, in order to, they take you down and they take you back up again, and then, or there's some part of the experience of going through whatever was in the story that causes some kind of catharsis or some kind of
yeah.
something.
It's definitely not a block. Well, what you describe is, the general blockbuster story. And if you go into independent movies, not all movies do that. Same thing with not all novels do that. And
Right, but the ones
I
that
like it when a TV show ends. Uh, so I used to like TV show that keep going on forever. I don't want it to end. And as I grow older, I actually like things to end. Some of my TV show like that I like recently ends after like 3 seasons or something like that. It just stops.
Mhm.
And I like that more. And Requiem for a Dream does that. It just stop. It's like this is what happened, and that's it. And I'm a fan of it. Not that it's not a popcorn eating movie, but it's definitely something
so there's
to
something
watch.
here that we're describing that I don't think either one of us fully grasps.
Under. Mm,
Like why these particular things are compelling to us
mm.
individually, and why particular things are not compelling to us and downright disturbing. And obviously, it has to do with our own, psychology, our own background.
Yeah.
But I would like to be able to come to a place where I can articulate it a little bit more clearly.
Yeah.
I find that interesting. And I imagine you don't, or find it less
I do.
interesting than I do.
I do not. Yeah, I do, but not as deep as your fascination of it, because we operate, from our free will episode. We know that from other episodes too. Your your background and your lack of a better term growing up experience affects your outlook. And I think for me, my fascination in something is more knowledge based, and then for the betterment of this is the same, in line with the same what do you call a person who's critical, what is that word I'm looking for, where a person is critical of something, almost fun, a cynic. I'm a cynic. So as a cynic, I kind of, the same reason that I kind of like Spock more than the other characters in Star Trek. It's the same reason why I think I tend to like Requiem for a Dream more than other works where it's a happy ending.
Yeah. Have you experienced malevolence and addiction in your life?
So I'm addicted to nicotine.
Hmm.
As far as malevolence, I mean, other than the fact I was in the army, and you see what you see, I didn't even see that much. But I wouldn't say. How do you define malevolence? What do
Like,
you?
have you encountered people who had power over you who
Oh yeah,
didn't have your best interest in mind and actively wanted to make you suffer, I guess?
no, but I think it's more. No, I would say no. I haven't had that exposure.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I wouldn't have that exposure, but it's very very close or adjacent to my growing up. So it's not strange for me to see. I assume you never watch, well, yeah, I assume you never watch Hong Kong action cinemas at all.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. So I would say that's a no.
Is Enter the
If you
Dragon Hong Kong?
No.
No.
Enter the Dragon is Hong Kong, but it's Bruce Lee, and it was produced and made in America by Warner Brothers.
Okay.
Uh, no, I would say John Woo is pretty close. Um, there's this movie recently, when it's not recent, last 10 years called The Raid, and the reason I bring up is majority of that is based on, frankly, like almost movie cop versus robbers, right? So good guy versus bad guys.
Mhm.
But if you don't grow up in that world and you don't know about the cinema, there's a lot of gangs storyline where the gang characters are just as good or as bad as the cop.
Mhm.
So in that world, there is no black and white. Everything is a gray. You can be a good cop, you can be a bad cop, you can be a good gangster, and you can be a bad gangster. And so the violence you see in those movies are, I would say, higher than the violence you see in American cinema, based on the fact that the entire culture is very, you know, attracted to martial art and attracted to fighting skills and all that stuff. So the
Mhm.
movies, when it comes out, it has to be more. It has to be amplified. So like the recent series that I'm a big fan of is John Wick, which I probably is not in your not in your territory of movie you enjoy, but
Well,
coming from,
is it like The Matrix at all in terms of
no,
combat? No.
very similar, but
Mm.
they combine very similar, but they combine. It's called hyper realistic, so it's not super realistic, but it's hyper realistic. So it's borderline. Makes it very entertaining movies for me, for action fans like me. And so growing up that world, yeah, circle back, growing up that world, no, I don't experience any malevolence, but my exposure to it, I would say, allow me to consume deeper. And so
Mhm.
why I like Requiem for a Dream is it's to me it's more realistic in regards to real life and the suffering of other humans. And this is why, as a cynic, I watch something like that and I'm like, yep, human beings suck. I gotta leave this planet. And that's and like if we want to address problems, we gotta fix on a systematic level some of this stuff, not society level. Like, oh, this is bad, don't do it. That's not gonna fix anything. But that's just why I'm drawn to this
Yeah.
kind of stuff
So,
more than you are.
okay. So I sort of had a mini revelation.
Mm,
Um, I mean, when I was younger, I think I did encounter malevolence, and I, I went through a period where I was sort of the victim of bullying,
mm,
and there was no escape from it. Like I had to go to the
mm.
bus stop and see these people. I had to go to school and see these people, and there was no one there to sort of protect me or, I just was at their mercy.
Yeah.
And so there was no escape and so I sort of, I guess I had to adapt to that by just sort of accepting that as reality. And I think when you experience stuff like that at a young age, it sort of drives you in the direction of addiction
Yeah.
because you want to numb out. If there's no escape,
Yeah.
then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You can't keep feeling that hypervigilance all the time. So you got to.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why Requiem for a Dream is so disturbing for me, because I've
Mm,
experienced malevolence, and I've been on the fringes of alcohol addiction, I guess you could say.
mm,
Um, I can see
yeah,
I can see why that would be attractive and why someone would want to go down that route. So I
yeah.
I find that so I think that's why I found it very disturbing.
Yeah, and with my army, like I wasn't exposed as much as before my army time, but I can see why. And I have like I know guys who left the army and didn't function well, and
Mhm.
one or two cases that
PTSD.
took their own PTSD, took their own lives, stuff like that. But there's a lot of not the way you experience malevolence when you were a childhood, but close to it, right?
Mhm.
It's like bullying is like universal. It's not, but the difference is that it's not. I guess I'm lucky in that I was older when I went to the army, so I know myself, so I could like you know take my mind out of that place and
Mhm.
understand it's just a job. Versus if I was younger, I'll probably be way more affected in that psyche. Do you was it continuous over time? Let's say from like third grade to fifth grade, or was it only for a short time
Yeah, it was
for you?
continuous. It was like
Mm,
third grade
sorry,
to into high school.
jeez, sorry to hear that. Was it small town stuff that just like carries with you that you can't break out of necessary, even if you logically understand? If you can logically process, it doesn't mean you can just grow out of it, for lack of a better term.
No, I mean you learn
So
these coping skills and then you take them with you into adulthood, and
yeah.
you have to unlearn them at some point.
Yeah, very hard to do. Very hard to do when you experience that. So yeah, I only come like adjacent or side by side to it in later adulthood.
Mhm.
With some of this stuff, the fascination for me. Yeah, I think this is why you find him so interesting, especially Crumb.
Yeah,
What about the
right.
what about the Atlas comics? It's not the Atlas. What was that guy? There was a famous comic strip or cartoon where it's a guy that's do 50 push-ups a day and got into this like super shape where he was scrawny before.
Oh,
um
George Atlas, was it?
it was basically the trend for bodybuilding with Arnold.
But these were
uh
ads in the back of comic books, right?
Ads. Okay, I don't know. I just know they exist. did you find uh did you find bodybuilding and Arnold back in the day fascinating as well, or did you miss the train on that one?
I missed the train on that one.
Because
No,
I think that's very closely intertwined. There's a lot of people who have negative body image, even like a kid or adult, it doesn't matter. And they go like the 100% reverse, right? They go crazy in shape, they become bodybuilders, and it just to the extreme. Um, a lot of it come from, trauma as well. It
right.
just,
So there's a fight and or flight response, and I was
mm,
more of the flight
mm.
than the fight.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As much as we evolve, we still very much. This is why I have an ease of understanding that we're just animals like everybody else or everything else on this planet. I think some people think that we're, you know, because we can communicate a little bit better, we're better, but we're very much are just also animals running around,
Mhm.
in some sense. So I don't have a difficulty, and that's the cynic again going through and just looking at this on a bigger scale and I just want to leave, go to another planet. And when I watch sci-fi like Star Wars and like anything that's intergalactic, I'm
Mhm.
super pumped because if it means it's intergalactic, and I can go somewhere else, I can warp. That's for me. It's like, yep, let me warp out of here. Let me be a space miner. Do something. I don't know. Just get out of here. And then the human experience to me is just so minutia. This tiny little planet with tiny little things on it, and have no understanding of how everything else work. And that's why I like sci-fi a lot. Not just escape from my own, individualized background. It's more escape from the whole. Uh, so I think that's the diversion between me and you. Is yours more core to your build makeup? Is
My
that a
what?
fair assessment?
My what
My
is
um your not platform but like fundamental perception of the world
Mhm.
is not like that. You're not cynic in that sense. It's more unique to your own storyline, for lack of a better term, your own upbringing and
Yeah.
experience.
Well, that's everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's unique to their own upbringing.
So why am I such a cynic on the human condition and the human race? Like what happened in my childhood that make me view all humans in such a vein or lens?
I don't know. Can you see that reflected in your parents at all?
Nope.
No.
I think my parents are just normal, normal parents. I don't know what happened with me that, because like most people watch Star Trek, they love it, they like the interaction between the characters and Kirk, but I like Spock for some reason.
I like Spock too, although I wouldn't say he was the one I gravitated towards.
Exactly, and I think most people aren't like that, but I gravitated toward him almost immediately. I'm like, yes, yes, right away. And I just laugh. I enjoy his not getting things.
Mhm.
I wonder if that's like somewhat like me. Like I sometimes don't get things. uh,
Yeah, I mean,
well,
I don't know.
well,
I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know your childhood. I don't know your
mm-hmm,
that would be
yeah,
an onion to
an episode,
unravel, wouldn't
yeah.
it?
Well, I think no promises to our listener, but we might have to do an episode 2 of this, like Crumb 2, so that we can watch the same content. I think it is not immediately, but down the line, same. We
Yeah,
can get to the same
listeners,
page on
we're
this.
not promising you anything, so don't get
No,
on our backs about that.
yeah, our one listener.
Scott Markowitz. No, my sister
Yeah,
listens too. Or at least
yeah.
she
So
said she.
too. So I exposed the podcast to ex coworkers
Mhm.
or colleagues I used to work to, except there's one current peer. But other than that, yeah. Like I said, so even for me, who's a fan of Freakonomic, I don't listen to it all the time. So we have a long way to go. I don't have to worry too much. But yeah, no, let's do a second episode on this. Or you think we covered enough?
Um, I'll have to think about that. We maybe instead of this movie, we could watch American movie because
The
there's a movie called American Movie. I talked about it with you last week. It's about this guy Mark Borchardt in Wisconsin, who's a movie maker.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it's
I'll watch it.
similar
Yeah, we'll
grounds,
see.
but not quite the same because
Yeah.
whereas I would say Crumb is a very competent artist, Mark
Mm,
Borchardt is decidedly less competent, which makes it sort of funny, but also
yeah.
sad.
Yeah. I'll link you Slackers or Slacker. I don't know the correct title, but I think it's in the same vein, and we might talk about that too. But any final thoughts before we sign off for Crumb?
Yeah, a couple things. Well, we should tell our audience that we're now on Apple iTunes, so
Yes.
you don't
Yes.
have to
Let's do
access
news.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do news and updates. What else you got?
So there's that. And we won't have an episode next week, but the following week we're planning on doing an episode where we review our progress from episode 1 through 9, discuss what works, what doesn't work, and I guess where we'll go in the future. So that'll be
Yes. Recap. Episode 10 will be a recap. So it won't be any new or new information. It'll just be a recap of very self-reflected.
Meta.
like every episode is this self. But that episode 10 will be specifically about doing is super very meta about the whole thing of podcasting
And what we've learned.
So
because I think we've learned. I think we're quite different than we were on episode 1. And also in episode 1 we asked the question. The very first question you asked was, "What is this episode? What is this podcast about?" We tried to answer that. So I think we can revisit that question in episode 10.
Ooh, sounds like a lot of homework. We might have to re-listen. I might have to re-listen to episode 1.
I don't enjoy that one as much as I enjoy some of our later ones. So.
Yeah. It just always sounds strange, right? Like when unless you're a performer of some kind, listening to your own music or, your own stuff all the time, to me, it's still strange. Now I can listen to you talk, but when I listen to me talk, it's weird. It's not enjoyable. Now there are some parts where I do enjoy, explaining things and re-listening, like, oh, that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But no, not the actual voice. It's strange.
You go into Spock mode when you hear your own voice.
I suppose. Along with iTunes, I don't know. Do you have any other news and updates?
No, I don't.
So, along with iTunes, we're also on Spotify and Stitcher. We're in the process of getting approved for Google Podcasts, and then Alexa and TuneIn as well. So basically, all these are platforms for people to get podcasts. So we're trying to go to many as possible with our podcast hoster. It just some of them takes a longer time frame than the other ones. But Apple Podcasts is definitely one where you can find us most. So give us a follow there as well. If you're following us on Apple iPhones, you can follow us there as well.
Give us a 5-star rating.
Yeah, give us a more than 5-star rating. Share it to other people. That's what I would ask on episode 10 as well. Going to, our success at episode 10. My ask is if we, the original reason why we wanted to see 10 is my other projects. I couldn't even get to episode 10. So that was my mark for, I wouldn't say success, but I would say viability and continual effort to see if it's something that's real. And so far, it's very enjoyable talking to you on this. So
yeah, I'm enjoying it too.
We will keep going into episode 50 or 100 or as long as we can. And so that's viability and sustainability is real. But I would ask our 1 or 2 or 3 listeners to share with someone else that might enjoy the same kind of topics or vibe. So yeah. Cool.
Even if they don't, share it.
Even if they don't, just make them follow it either. Yeah. Something we'll discuss offline, but we might be getting on social media depending on our bandwidth. So easier to find more listeners there. Alrighty. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day.
Stay tuned for Tang's outro.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, this is Tang here with the Epic Meta podcast team. Thank you so much for listening. Did you listen to the whole episode? Did you enjoy it? Were there things that we missed? Were there topics you would like for us to dive deeper into? And of course, what other topics should we discuss in the future? If you have any of these thoughts or comments, please share with us what you think and how you feel regarding the current episode, and of course, other ideas that you might have for future episodes below. As always, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, be good and be well.